This is Padmavati, Assistant Director from India Tourism Chennai. On behalf of Ministry of Tourism, it's a pleasure and honor to invite you all the participants for this 82nd Dekho Apna Desh webinar session. Today's session is on the stories of Madurai. Earlier, we had a lot of sessions on main places in Tamil Nadu, such as Mamallapuram, Puducherry, Chennai, and now it's time to explore the city of Madurai. So you all know Madurai is quite famous for Meenakshi Amman temple. It's one of the iconic places in the world. A lot of thousands of devotees used to visit this place every day. And not only that, we have Tirumalai Nayakar Palace and a lot of places to see. And Madurai is quite famous for its Tamil Changam. Those places are there. And what to say, very much famous for street food cuisine, such as hot, fluffy idlis, then jigatanda, and so much more. However, it would be very much exciting and interesting if the same stories of Madurai will be told by our story trials team. So now I would like to request Madam Akila Raman from Story Trials to take us through the lanes of Madurai with its beautiful stories and memories. Ma'am, now over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Padma. That was very nice. Thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you to the Ministry of Tourism for this wonderful initiative, because in these difficult times, this is a very good way to visit and see places. And of course, thank you to all the people who have joined us today and who are a part of today's program. Let me begin by introducing where we are from. Now, my name is Akila, and I have with me my colleague, Swarna. Now, both of us belong to a company called Story Trails. And at Story Trails, our job is a very interesting one. We dig out stories about people, about places, about monuments, about street names. Sometimes, even when there isn't anything much to speak of, there is an interesting story to that place, and we can still have a nice way of saying it. So, this is our job. We connect them all together and we present them as walking tours. We have walking tours in 5 cities across India. We also do audio tours in museums, because that is a very important place too, where you can see so many exhibits and know what exactly those exhibits mean. So telling the stories behind those exhibits is a wonderful way of getting to understand that exhibit. Of late, we've gone into the virtual space. We do a lot of videos about historical events or people. We also do podcasts with a whole lot of experts on different fields. So all this keeps us very, very busy. And we are delighted that we can showcase Madurai for you, because the two of us love Madurai. So what makes Madurai so special? Did you know that Madurai is one of the oldest places in India? As a city, it is a very, very old city. It is a place that is called the Temple City, simply because you have the Meenakshi Amman temple sitting bang in the middle of the city. In Tamil, it is called Tunga Nagaram. So, what does that mean? It means a city that never sleeps. Seriously, it doesn't. You can go out at 12 o'clock in the night and you can still see a lot of activity around you and eat a good bit of the food that Padma spoke about. So, it's a place that is connected with dynasties like the Pandyas and the Nayaks. The Romans have been trading with Madurai from a very long time ago. Makes you wonder why they came here, isn't it? The cottons of Madurai was what was a big draw. So they came for the cotton, they came for the jasmine. So with all this, Madurai is an exciting city to visit. So let me start my stories by asking you to think about how ancient this city could possibly be. Well, it is a very ancient city, but it also depends on who you are addressing this question to. Now, if you go to the center of Madurai city, which has the famous Meenakshi temple, and you ask people there, how old is this temple, for instance, you will get many opinions. You ask a historian, and the historian will tell you that the center of Madurai, the core of the temple itself, it's been a sacred place for a very long time. We do know that from the 6th and the 7th centuries itself, people have spoken about that area. But all those structures that you see in Madurai right now, those are fairly recent, in the sense that those are structures. I don't know if you all can see it, but I have started sharing my screen. Swarna, can you see it? Hello? Hello?
No, Akila, no, I can't see the screen yet.
Okay, give me a minute and I'll figure out a way how to get this started. All right, in fact, I'll just go back to telling you my story, and then in the end, I will show you the pictures. Maybe that's a better way to do it. So like I was saying, if you ask a historian how old is this city, they will tell you that the core of Madurai, where the temple is centered, has been very, very sacred for the longest time. So it was around the 6th and the 7th centuries that poets started writing about the gods of Madurai. But what you can see now, those 4 big gopurams, those tall entrance towers, they are a much later addition. Now, when a historian says much later edition, it means somewhere between the 14th and the 17th century. He's just being very relative in how he uses the word later. But you meet a devotee over there and you ask that devotee, how old is the city of Madurai? You'll get a completely different answer. That person will tell you, oh, it's at least 5,000 years old. You see, Madurai was there when the gods were walking on the earth. It seems the king of the gods, Indra, was once punished for some misdeed and he was sent down to earth. And he was wandering that area when he spotted a Shiva Lingam, a cylindrical representation of Shiva right over there. And he decided he would sit there and worship that Shiva Lingam. So he started doing that. And this sight of the great god, of the great king of the heavens, Indra, sitting there and worshipping a Shiva Lingam, was spotted by a woodcutter. Now, this woodcutter went straight to the king and told him what he saw. And the king was so fascinated, he decided to come and have a look. He saw the lingam too. So he decided he would build a temple around the lingam. And while he was at it, he decided he might as well add in a city. And that's how a city got built all around that central sacred spot. And on the day of the inauguration of the city, it seems Shiva, the great god of destruction, looked down from the heavens.
Sorry, Akila. I'm coming in between. Your PPT is not visible. Have you shared?
No, I haven't shared it yet. Not
okay,
yet.
then it's fine because people are writing. So I just thought.
I know.
Okay, please go ahead. Okay, thank you.
Just a second. There it comes. Is that visible?
Yes, it is, Akila.
Yes, Akila.
Okay. So this beautiful pictures that you can see are the main gopurams. And like I was saying, on the final day, when the city was due for its inauguration, Shiva looked down with so much joy at this brand new city. And as he bent down like that over the heavens, a few drops of nectar fell from his hair and onto the city below. Now, in Sanskrit, nectar is Maduram. And from that day on, this city has been called Madurai, the place where the nectar fell. So, who is right, the historian or the devotee? Well, seriously, it's a very difficult question to answer because both of them are right, isn't it? They have their own viewpoints. But if you're looking from the point of view of pure history, then we need to go back a little in time. And I can tell you that this city is connected very closely with 2 dynasties. One was called the Pandyas, and the other was called the Nayak kings of Madurai. So these Pandyas seem to have existed a long, long time ago because you can see evidence of Pandya rule in a kind of literature that was written in Madurai. And this literature was written between 300 BCE and 300 CE, those 600 years of transfer between the BCE and CE period was when this literature was written. And they all speak about the Pandyas. And they ruled almost until the 12th century CE. You see, it makes the Pandyas one of the longest ruling dynasties in India. So who else wrote about the Pandyas? Megasthenes did, the Greek author Megasthenes. He wrote about a city called Madurai, and he says it was a big, bustling trading center. It was a marketplace. It was a very important marketplace. Now, this was somewhere in the 1st century, and very quickly in the 12th century, well, not very quickly, but in the 12th century, Marco Polo also wrote about it. And strangely, he had pretty much the same thing to say about Madurai. So it has been a busy center for the longest time. Which also brings us to the question, who was buying in Madurai? If it was such a big trading center, who were the buyers in Madurai? And the answer to that is the Romans. In those very early days, it was the Romans who were coming very often to Madurai and buying a whole lot of things from here. And among the things they took back, one was pearls, lots and lots of pearls, because this area was very famous for its pearls. And the other equally big thing was the cottons of Madurai. So you see, this is a city that goes back a long time. And my task today was to kind of set a context for you so that you can understand where we come from when we speak about the city. To go on to the next part of the story, I'm handing over the baton to Swarna. She'll tell you the next.
Yeah, I'm coming in between, Akila. If you can just make it full screen, so that, yeah.
Just try.
No, that's fine. So you'll
Yes,
just
there
come.
you go.
Yeah, it is now.
Got it?
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to stick to this. So pardon me, people, if it's going to stay in one picture for too long. But the stories, I hope, will be interesting enough to capture your attention. So go ahead, Swarna.
Thank you, Akila. Now, how can we speak about Madurai without speaking about Meenakshi? She is the goddess in the temple in the center of the city and a very important lady in Madurai. But what's her story? They say that there was once a Pandyan king by the name Malayadwaja Pandyan. His name is a bit of a tongue twister, so I'm just going to call him the king. Now, the king and his wife had a great sorrow in their life. They were childless. So they decided to appeal to the gods. The king lit a huge sacrificial fire and poured into it all kinds of offerings. And soon enough, out of the fire came a little girl. She climbed on to the king's lap and she sat there. The delighted king, of course, took this as an answer from the gods, took this little girl home and brought her up as his own daughter. And since there was no son to follow him, he decided to give the throne to her. Now, Meenakshi was groomed to be a queen. She learned administration, martial arts, economics, and excelled in all of them. I forgot to tell you one small detail. Our heroine, Meenakshi, was normal in every way except one. She had 3 breasts instead of the normal 2. The king had taken her to the royal doctor, who very confidently declared that her 3rd breast would disappear the day she met her match in every way. Everyone left it at that. In time, the king passed away, Meenakshi was crowned, and this new queen had to go out and conquer some territory to show her might. So Meenakshi marched around India, ruthlessly defeating anyone who dared to oppose her. She went to the northern parts of India, and story goes, she soon reached the Himalayas itself. And this is where our hero Shiva has his home. Meenakshi defeated all his commanders and refused to fight with any more of them. She asked for Shiva himself to come and face her. Shiva came and stood in front of her, all primed and ready for battle, when something wonderful happened. Meenakshi, who had never cast her eyes down in front of any man before, suddenly went all red in the face and she couldn't even meet Shiva's gaze. And of course, you can all guess what would have happened. Her 3rd breast vanished. She knew she had met her match. She fell in love with Shiva. Shiva, well, he's a different kind of person, wasn't he? He has his own fashion statement. Now, he wore a tiger skin around his waist. His ornaments were real and live snakes. He wore matted locks, and his entire body was smeared in ashes. But Meenakshi, you see, was famed for her beauty. She was said to be of glowing skin, beautiful eyes, and a smile that could brighten any room, they say. And Shiva, of course, has to come to Madurai to marry the queen of Madurai. Can you imagine the first impression he would make if he came here just looking the way he was? But it is said that only in Madurai, Shiva came as Sundaresa, the handsome one. He transformed himself and was as good looking as she was charming. Their marriage was well attended by all gods and goddesses, and more importantly, it was a great success. It is said that Shiva and Meenakshi ruled over Madurai wisely and well for a long time, and their descendants were the Pandyan kings, or so they claim. Till date, Meenakshi is the queen of Madurai. Many girls born in Madurai are still named Meenakshi. And her temple is the highest structure there is in the center of the city. And no building within a certain radius from the temple can be built taller than the temple gopurams. That was the rule in those days, and it is still a rule today. Over to you, Akila.
Thank you, Swarna. So that is a lot of pictures about the temple that we are showing you, simply because it is such an important it is such an important landmark in the center of the city. And Meenakshi is all powerful in Madurai. You shouldn't think that her power has gone down in the years at all, because she did have a role to play in history too. In fact, let me tell you about a king who ruled in these parts. Apparently, he had a very bad cold, and he had a constant cold. He was sneezing and coughing and sniffing and wheezing. Life cannot have been pleasant for him at all. So he had gone to all the local doctors, and everybody had tried their level best, but nobody could quite set him right. It seems he once had a dream, and in that dream, Meenakshi and Shiva appeared in front of him, and they told him that if he shifted his capital to Madurai, his cold will vanish. Going to take that chance, don't you think? He shifted his capital to Madurai, his cold vanished, and he ruled from Madurai for quite a good bit of time, really. So let me introduce you to Thirumalai Nayak. This is a historical king, and he ruled between 1526 and 59. And he was a very powerful king in Madurai in those days. And it is because of him that so many of those modern structures that you can see around Madurai have all come up over there. And he was one of the most famous kings of the Nayak dynasty. So let's just backtrack in time a little bit and see where the Nayaks came from. So between the 13th and the 17th century, in central India, there was a very powerful kingdom called the Vijayanagara Empire. Now, Vijayanagara Empire had its capital in Hampi, in modern-day Karnataka. Now, this Vijayanagara Empire, as it expanded, it came further down south, and in all the places they conquered, they used to appoint a governor there who ruled in the name of the Vijayanagara Empire. Now, this governor was called a Nayak. So by the 1500s, there was a Nayak in Madurai, and in the middle 1500s, there was a particular Nayak there called Nagamma Nayak. Nagamma Nayak was ruling in the name of the Vijayanagara kings, but he was ambitious. So when the time was ripe, he declared his independence from the Vijayanagara king. Now, as you can imagine, the Vijayanagara king was not happy with this at all. How dare the governor declare his independence? So he sent a young general named Vishwanatha Nayak to come to Madurai and defeat Nagamma Nayak. Vishwanatha Nayak did just that. He came, he defeated Nagamma, and he took him back to Hampi in chains. And when he went there, the king was so delighted, he made Vishwanatha Nayak the new governor of Madurai, the new Nayak of Madurai. Now, what happened to Nagamma? Well, he was given a full pardon. You see, Nagamma Nayak was Vishwanatha Nayak's father. So Vishwanatha Nayak appealed to the king and he got released. But Vishwanatha Nayak now became, like I said, the Nayak of Madurai. He was ruling wisely in Madurai. And this was the time when the Vijayanagara kingdom started declining. So again, when the time was ripe, Vishwanatha Nayak declared his independence from the Vijayanagara kingdom. and established his own rule in Madurai. And this rule is what is called the Nayak period in Madurai. Now, 13 kings ruled during this period, and their period itself lasted for around 200 years. And during that 200 years, among the many things they did, it seemed like shifting the capital was a very important task. 3 times they shifted the capital. So it all started in 1616 when Muthu Veerappa Nayak decided that Tiruchi made a better capital. Now, Tiruchi is about 130 kilometers to the north of Madurai. So he shifted his capital from Madurai to Tiruchi. Very quickly, within 20 years, his brother, Tirumalai Nayak, decided to come back to Madurai. You know the reason why he came back to Madurai, isn't it? I just shared that story with you. So back came the Nayak capital to Madurai. It stayed there for some time. 1665, the capital went back to Tiruchi. So you ask the historians, and they will tell you that technically Tiruchi is a better place to make it into a capital. Because you see, look at that fort over there. There's that huge rock bang in the middle of the town, and that fort sits proud over there. So you see, it's got a lot of strategic importance. The Kaveri River was running right next to Tiruchi, so it was way more fertile. Even the weather was just a tad better than Madurai was. So for all these reasons, Tiruchi was a better option, and that's why perhaps Jagannatha Nayak decided to go back there. But in that time that he was ruling over here, that was when Tirumalai Nayak decided that he was going to give Madurai a complete makeover. Really. He added so many structures to Madurai and beautified the city very, very much. One of the most important structures that he did add was the Tirumalai Nayak Palace. You see, this was a period when Madurai had a lot of peace and prosperity. There was riches in the kingdom. So Tirumalai Nayak could afford to build a palace for himself. He decided he would build a palace like no other. It had to be exclusive. So they chose an area bang in the middle of the town. He just poured his money into it. And what resulted is this very beautiful Tirumalai Nayak Palace. It was a massive palace. The ruins are still there in Madurai. You can visit it even today. Sad to say, what you can see today is about a fourth of what was there. Tirumalai Nayak built it really large. What style is it built on? It's a very strange mix. If you see the arches on the right of our picture, you'll notice that they are very North Indian arches, isn't it? Very Rajasthani arches. There is a good bit of South Indian architecture in this. And just to make things interesting, he threw in a large handful of Italian architecture too. And this palace was built big enough to house his entire family, his extended family. His court was held over there. His own private temple was inside. There was an armory inside. There was a tank inside. Everything that made life comfortable for Tirumalai Nayak was inside that palace. And that palace was his home for the longest time. But like I said, in 1665, the capital itself went back to Trichy. So what's the point of having this palace here? So when Jagannatha Nayak made the move to Trichy, you know what he did to this palace? He dismantled parts of the palace and he took those big chunks away to Trichy and he used it to rebuild his palace over there. So if you visit Madurai today, what you can see will be a very small part of the palace. But in recent years, it's been taken over by the ASI and they have done a good job of renovating the palace and maintaining it. So this is what it looks like now. It is still a very beautiful structure. So when I spoke about North Indian and South Indian influences and Italian influences, you can see all of that in this picture. So the palace is taken over by the ASI and it's today working as a museum. It's a museum and it is a memorial to the Nayak rule in Madurai. But among the many things that Tirumalai Nayak built, one more was this Pudu Mandapam. The Pudu Mandapam is a little hall which is bang in front of the Meenakshi temple. And today it works as a lot of different things, but the pillars in the Pudu Mandapam are amazing. They're very beautifully carved. And among the many things that you can see there are statues, life-size statues of the Nayak kings and queens. And that is very interesting.
Now, Tirumalai did more than just add beautiful buildings to Madurai. Here, he also built a tradition that the city still follows. Let me tell you about that. Every year, Madurai celebrates a wedding with great pomp and show. And what you'll be seeing on your screen shortly are the chariots that carry the newly married couple around their city. Remember, we told you that Shiva came to Madurai to marry the Queen Meenakshi? Story goes that their wedding was a grand affair attended by all the gods. The guest of honor was Lord Vishnu, the god of protection. You see, he is Meenakshi's brother, and he was given the honor of giving his sister away in marriage. He set off from his home, the Alagar Hills, which is on the outskirts of Madurai, and he started his way towards the city. But he took his own time getting here. He stopped in many places along the way, and by the time he reached Madurai, or rather the banks of the river Vaigai running through Madurai, the wedding ceremony was already over. Vishnu was shocked and furious that they did not wait for him. And to appease him, Meenakshi and Shiva rushed to meet him at the river. Vishnu handed all the gifts to them but refused to enter the city of Madurai. In a fine fit of fury, he turned around and marched right back to his home in Alagar Hills. Now, this charming story is reenacted every year in Madurai. The idols of Shiva and Meenakshi are wedded in the city. The idol of Vishnu starts his march down the Alagar Hills, making leisurely stops and points at various points along the way, even getting a change of clothes at some of these stops. Finally, when the deity reaches the river, his followers are duly informed that the wedding is already over. To this day, Vishnu has never crossed that river. And Madurai celebrates this year after year like a family drama that people here never seem to tire of. This is called the Chittirai festival, and it falls between the month of April and May. Now, this is a time when Madurai is in complete celebration mode because you see, on each of these days, there's a different ceremony. The festival starts off with Meenakshi's coronation inside the temple. The next day, she goes out to conquer some territory. She encounters Shiva. They enact it in one of the streets in the city center. There is a small battle between Shiva and Meenakshi, and then they fall in love. They invite all and sundry for their wedding, which happens with great fanfare in the temple next day. And at the end, on the last day of this festival, is when Vishnu reaches the river. And that is a public holiday in Madurai every year. In between this, the day right after the wedding is the chariot festival. Meenakshi sits on one of the chariots and Shiva on the other. It is pulled by thousands of people who throng the streets on that day. Here's what it looks like. Can we have the video, Akila?
No, Shubha, I removed that because it wasn't working very well.
Okay. So you can, I'm sure there are multiple videos that you can really look up to see the chariot and the streets, just a sea of heads on that day. Now, historians, of course, believe that this story is entirely made up by none other than the king Thirumalai Nayak himself. Remember, Akila told you about this famous king, the king with the sniffles? Now, during his reign, Shaivites, the worshippers of Shiva, celebrated a temple festival in April every year. And Vaishnavites, or the worshippers of Vishnu, had their own festival that they celebrated between January and February every year. So and these two groups rarely saw eye to eye. So to broker peace between these two groups, Thirumalai Nayak came up with the idea of combining these two festivals into one grand celebration. And just like that, Shiva and Vishnu were tied in bonds of marriage. So no more tiffs between the big gods, no more fights among their followers as well. And 400 years later, this tradition, of course, still continues with the festival getting grander and bigger every passing year.
Thank you, Shubha. That was a very interesting story. And I find it particularly charming that something that started so long ago can have such a long-reaching effect on the city until today. But then, when you think of it, there are so many people who have left a mark on the city, isn't it? Let's talk a bit about a person who left a mark on the city simply because he pulled down a landmark in the city. But before I go there, I must tell you that Madurai is like a very model. It's a model of town planning. So you have the temple sitting in the center of the city, and all around it, in concentric squares, you have the first outer streets of the temple. Now, each of these streets are named after a Tamil month. And during that particular month, the god of the temple will take a walk around that particular street just to see that all was well over there. So you have this bunch of streets. Then outside of that, you had a Pandya fort, which we will be talking about later. And beyond that, you had a Nayak fort. Because after all, they were ruling Madurai. So they had to build a fort, isn't it? So the Nayak fort was still standing there until the 1800s when the British came to Madurai. So the British got hold of Madurai in 1801. And almost immediately after, there was a terrible outbreak of cholera in Madurai. People were dying like flies. So when they were looking around to see where that cholera was spreading from, they realized that the moat outside the Nayak fort, which was filled with water, was causing the problem. You see, that water had got contaminated and the cholera was spreading from there. So the British decided the best thing to do was to fill up that moat and drain all that water away. So when they planned to do that, they also felt that the better thing to do was to bring down this Nayak fort because it was kind of constricting the city. It was not letting it expand outward. So they said, let's bring down the Nayak fort, the walls, and fill up the moat and widen the city all in one fell swoop. So they decided to do just that. Initially, apparently, they got the prisoners sitting in the Madurai jail to come in and do this work for them. Work started. And that's when the people of Madurai got a little upset. See, this was their city. This was their fort. So what business had this white man here doing anything about it? So there's a little bit of resentment against the British. And so that's when the collector of Madurai, his name was Blackburn. And Blackburn had an assistant named Marrett. You can instantly see where I'm coming from, isn't it? The street is very clearly marked. So between Blackburn and Marrett, they hatched a very nice plan. They decided that they would ask anybody in Madurai, whoever was interested, they could tear down the fort walls and they could use the rubble, the rubbish that they collected after tearing down the walls, they could use that rubble to fill up the moat. And in the end, how much ever space they cleared, that space belonged to them. This was a brilliant idea. So very quickly, you can bet there was no fort walls around Madurai. There was no moat around Madurai, but there was a brand new street called the Marrett Street. And there were a whole bunch of new landlords in Madurai. Very happy landlords, I must say. So you see that new street which came up is still called Marrett Street. And it is there very close to the temple. And like I said, it is one of those streets that got its name simply because this man brought down a piece of Madurai history. So that is the Marrett Street. Now, one big advantage of doing a webinar is that you don't have to worry too much about time and space and distance. You can go anywhere you like. And what I'm going to do right now is to take you to this place called Keezhadi. Keezhadi is just 15 kilometers southeast of Madurai. And Keezhadi is very much in the news right now. So what is so special about Keezhadi? Well, to put it in a nutshell, the archaeological department is working there on an excavation, and the digs in Keezhadi have yielded some very exciting new information. So I'm definitely going to tell you about that information. But before we go there, let me give you a context as usual to help you understand where I'm coming from when I speak about Keezhadi. So if any one of us who live in India are familiar with the Indus Valley civilization because it is the oldest civilization that we know of till date at least. So it was a very large civilization. Indus Valley does have that reputation of being one of the largest civilizations in the world. And It covered a huge area. In modern day terms, it would be all along the northern borders of India, along the western borders of India, and it extended into Afghanistan and Pakistan. So historians have given it a date, and they say that it existed somewhere from the 2600 BCE to 1600 BCE. So it was a long time ago. It was an enormous civilization. As you can see, there are so many structural ruins that have been discovered in the Indus Valley civilization, and that in itself is enough to make this a very famous and a well-known civilization. But what about South India? Did South India have a civilization that old? Well, we do know that 1.5 million years ago, there was a civilization in South India because we found tools belonging to the old Stone Age. It's found in various parts of South India, and that proves that there was some kind of a civilization. But we didn't have too many of these structural things like I just showed you in the Indus Valley civilization. That was not there. On the other hand, we had literary evidence. But then this literary evidence was only from the 3rd century BCE. So if I was going to tell you what this literary evidence is, it is the Sangam literature. If you remember, I spoke about it even earlier. Now, the Sangam literature is a body of work which was composed between 300 BCE and 300 CE. So that 600-year period was when the Sangam literature was composed. And this Sangam literature speaks about the Pandyas. The very word Pandya seems to come from the Tamil word Pandu, meaning ancient. So because they were an ancient dynasty, maybe they had the name of the Pandyas. But these Pandyas were a very powerful dynasty. They were rich, they were prosperous, it was a stable kingdom, and these were kings who were very interested in writing and poetry. So the Pandya kings called for what are called 3 Sangams. Now, what does the word Sangam mean? It just means a gathering of poets and writers who all came together and wrote. So this was a time which was quite busy in terms of literature during that period. And the full body of work that they composed is called the Sangam literature. Now, history records that the Pandyas actually held 3 Sangams. The first 2 Sangams were so far back in the past that apparently the gods were a part of the Sangam. But like I said, hard historical evidence comes from the 3rd Sangam. And that speaks about the Pandyas and the kind of lifestyle that they had. So while we do have this much information, we don't know anything more. So it has generally been assumed that the civilization in South India began somewhere around 3rd century BCE until Kizhadi happened. Now, Kizhadi has discovered structural remains like the ones that you can see. It's a well that you are seeing on your right, which has been dug into the earth with those pottery rims. So these kind of structural remains have been found in Kizhadi, along with a whole lot of other things. And archaeologists have done some very scientific dating of all what they have discovered. And what they have discovered is that it pushes the discovery in Kizhadi, pushes the date of Tamil civilization by a good 3 centuries back. So it's been discovered that much of this happened in 580 BCE. So you see, it's a very exciting find for the Tamil Nadu Archaeological Department, for the people of Tamil Nadu. All of us are very excited about what is happening over here. It does set off a lot of questions. So among the many things that they have discovered, so what you're seeing there is a palm leaf manuscript about the Sangam period. But beyond this, look at the pots that have been discovered. There are beads. This is a carnelian bead, and that picture of the boar is said to have probably been done in Rome because they were masters at making intaglio prints like this one. So this was found in Kizhadi. Beyond this, you have found all these pottery shards over here. Now, these pottery shards are particularly interesting to an archaeologist because the designs that you see on them, well, they've called it graffiti. And much of these designs are very similar to the designs that you can see in the Indus Valley civilization. And strangely enough, all these graffiti marks that you see both here and in the Indus Valley civilization, they have not been deciphered till date. So what we do have is that after this, there are inscriptions in a language called Tamil. And that Tamil is what helps us tell that that this civilization went as far back as 580. So it is, like I said, a very interesting set of excavations that is happening over there. And like all good excavations, this one too throws up more questions as much as it does give us answers. Is there any connection between the Indus Valley civilization and this civilization? How did the script of that Indus Valley civilization land up over here? Did people migrate from here to there or from there to here? So all these questions have still been thrown up. And the nice thing is you can sit back and wait for more answers to come because the digs are still ongoing. The archaeologists are still sitting in Kiradi, and every day they keep discovering something new and something more exciting. And we are looking forward to many more answers from this little village.
Thank you, Akila. Now, from food for thought, let's move on to some food for the stomach. Now, when you are in Madurai, Ms. Padmavati spoke about it earlier. Akila mentioned there are two things you cannot avoid while you are in Madurai. One is definitely Meenakshi, the goddess of this beautiful city. The other, I swear, as you can see on your food, as you can see on your screen, is food. And what happens when these two meet? You have a feast. Let me tell you the story of Meenakshi's wedding feast. When Meenakshi got married to Shiva, it was quite a wedding. The entire city of Madurai feasted until bursting point. But even after everyone eating, there was a lot of leftovers. Meenakshi kept wondering out loud about what to do with all the food, and she managed to hint that maybe there was so much leftovers because many of her husband's friends and family did not turn up for the wedding. Shiva had to teach his proud wife a lesson. So he put a spell on one of his demon friends, Gundodran. Now, Gundodran literally means the fat one. And when Gundodran sat down to eat, he was incredibly hungry. He ate all the food in sight. Every last bit of the wedding feast was over, but he was still hungry. He ate all the uncooked food in the kitchen. He was still hungry. He attacked the storeroom, and it looked like he was going to gobble up the pans, the pots, along with the cooks of Madurai, maybe the entire city even. Meenakshi had learned her lesson. Shiva put an end to his curse. But after all this eating, Kundodran was desperately thirsty. So Shiva brought down a river in Madurai to quench his thirst. Now Gundodran put out his hand to receive the water to drink. Now this gesture is Vai in Tamil and hand is Kai. So the river in Madurai came to be known as Vaigai, and it still runs through the city. So you see, the city has even historically seen some serious eating. Madurai, even today, has a huge appetite and thousands of eating places. To do justice to all the food and everybody's recommendations, you would need at least 6 months and 7 stomachs to go with it. But we'll give you just a small teaser of some of its popular foods. Now, generally, there is a common misconception that Tamil Nadu is all about vegetarianism. Let me give you a little surprise. Only 2.5% of Tamil Nadu is vegetarian. And this part of Tamil Nadu, the region in and around Madurai, it is a meat eater's paradise. Madurai, especially, is famous for its mess culture. Mess, I really don't know what you thought of when I said that word. But in Madurai, a mess is a place where you get spicy, home style cooked non vegetarian food served with a minimum fuss. But why call it a mess? Most people believe that the word carries over from the military. To be an army man, you literally had to beef up your muscles and be physically strong. So army men were compulsorily served meat. And when these men returned home, they craved for the same kind of food. But most Indian communities has restrictions on when you can and cannot eat meat. So is it any surprise that these messes started here and became so popular? Because with a mess, you can eat meat any day, every day, 3 times a day if you so wanted. Even today, Madurai's messes are very popular and they serve up a mind boggling variety of meat. Aside from the usual suspects of chicken, mutton, fish, you can also find rabbit, pigeon, even emu if you so wish. And when it comes to the mutton, the goat, Madurai takes great pride in serving up almost every part of the animal. Everything except the teeth, as one very proud Madurai chef told me once. One of the unique dishes in Madurai is the kola urunda. Kola urunda is a fine mince of goat meat along with the fine mince of ginger, garlic, onion, chili, cashews. An egg is added to bind the mixture. It's rolled into small balls and they're deep fried. Let me tell you, they are delicious. But what's the most sought after delicacy that Madurai loves? It's the irami. You see that tiny little fish on your screen? It's just this big, each one. Ire are a kind of freshwater fish that grows in the still waters of the rice fields or in freshwater ponds, locally known as kammai. They're available traditionally for a very short period during the year for just 2 months before the rice harvest. The locals swear that the best thing to serve a guest, the one you want to impress, it is definitely a rich, spicy tamarind based curry of Ira mean, along with rice and all the other delicacies, of course. But what do you do if it's not the season for Ira mean? Then you serve Neimeen. Neimeen is sear fish, also known as Indian mackerel. It's sliced thin and it's prepared by marinating it in spices and deep frying it.
There
I,
you go. Once you talk about food, it is going to be very difficult for me to bring everyone back to a little bit more of history, but let me give it a shot. Yeah. So we've been talking so much, about Madurai, and one thing that I must tell you is that over here, at least, every second boy is named Pandyan, just like every third girl is named Meenakshi. Those are the very common names in Madurai, simply because the goddess there is Meenakshi, and simply because the Pandyas were such a powerful force over here. So you just ask a local Madurai person, when did the Pandyas, how long did the Pandyas rule over here? And you'll get an answer that will make it seem that when the dinosaurs were on the earth, the Pandyas were also ruling the earth. But then, all said and done, they did rule for the longest time, isn't it? 1500 years. Uh, most of the time they were around. Sometimes their kingdom was vast. Sometimes they were ruling a tiny little speck. But they managed to last through those 1500 years. So the Pandyas have been very, very powerful. And how do we get much of the information about the Pandyas? Like I said, one of them is from this literary work called the Madurai Kanchi. The Madurai Kanchi is a poem, and we've found it somewhere in the 2nd century AD. And Madurai Kanchi speaks about the beauties of Madurai. I like the way it describes the city because it says the city had roads devoted to one kind of produce. Apparently, one street was all for flowers, the beautiful jasmine flowers of Madurai being sold in heaps by women sitting outside there. You can imagine how fragrant that street must have been as you walked through. Another street was devoted to grain, bags and bags of grain, sacks of rice, and so many other things. Pepper, huge quantities of pepper were traded from over here. And there was another street devoted to the jewelers. So they had their gold and silver and rubies and precious stones, yes. But remember what I told you before about Madurai being a big center for pearls. So they had lots of pearls being traded from in that area. So Madurai must have been quite a bustling city in those days. The king was a very important person and he ruled with some amount of wisdom, I'm guessing, because all these poems seem to say that about him. So there were temples, it seems, for all the gods. As you can see, Madurai is full of temples. So all those gods had temples. And if you thought it was a good little city that behaved well, and there were as many liquor shops in the city as there were food joints in the city. So it was a thriving city. Now, Madurai Kanchi, along with all the other poetry that we have from the Pandyas, well, they all are written by court poets, isn't it? And what is the job of a court poet? He has to make the king about whom he's writing seem half like God. That is his role in life. So when it comes to history, most historians are a little uncomfortable about taking the court poets at face value. They just take them with a large pinch of salt. But even after discounting all that, I think Madurai, the Pandya kings of Madurai, did quite well for themselves. So while we have been speaking so much about the Pandyas, it's very difficult for me to show you any monument that is left over from the Pandya times. One bit is, of course, the temple itself. The next bit that we have is this fort wall that you can see. It's so busy and so active that it's actually very difficult to spot a wall over there. But what you're seeing is an entranceway into the fort. It's called the Vittavasal. Vittavasal literally translates to the doorway that got left behind. The fort too is all gone, and somehow this one has stuck on. So maybe that's why they called it the doorway that got left behind. But if you ask me, it hasn't been left behind in any way. Take a look at it. There's a shop selling photo framed pictures on one side. There's a shop selling something else on the on our right. You can see there's a light over there, and there's a shop inside selling all kinds of goods. There are actually people living inside these fort walls. That's why I call it a piece of living architecture. 13th century fort with people living inside it. So this is the Vittavasal. At least we have this tiny little bit left of the Pandya fort. Of the Nayak fort, of course, we have nothing left except Marat Street. So with this, I have reached the last story that I'm planning to tell you for today. And that is again about the decline of the Nayaks. So for that, I have to show you these pictures. Now, it does look monstrous, isn't it? Huge, tall, towering pillars, which are standing bang in the middle of the city. For what reason are they there? Well, I will tell you all about that. But this is called the Pattathoon. Pattathoon literally translates to 10 pillars. And they stand like this in the middle of the city, in the middle of a very busy part of the city, really. And they don't seem to have a reason why they are there. But since you know the story of the palace that Thirumalai Nayak built, I can just add to it and tell you that this is the back part of that palace. This was built as what is called the Rangavilasam. It was the place where Thirumalai Nayak's younger brother had his own private quarters. And remember, I told you how they dismantled the palace and took it away to Tiruchi. So all that's left of this wing of the palace is just these 10 pillars. And this dismantling itself has some connection with the downfall of the Nayaks. So let me tell you the story about how the Nayak dynasty itself came to an end. Now, the last of the Nayak kings, well, he wasn't a king, it was a queen. And I'm just going to tell you that you know her name. You know what every second girl in Madurai was named, isn't it? Her name was Queen Meenakshi. Meenakshi was at that time ruling from Tiruchi. Remember, 1665 itself, they had gone there. This was in 1703. So Meenakshi was ruling from Tiruchi, and her husband had passed away. They had no heir. So she decided to adopt a son from within the royal family, and she appointed herself the queen regent for this young boy. And she started ruling from Tiruchi. Now, she discovered, much to her horror, that her biggest problem was within her court because most of her ministers were corrupt and inept, and they were quite useless for being ministers. So Meenakshi decided that she had to set all this right. So she threw out some of these ministers and she was trying to get her court in order. And that is when we have the arrival of a gentleman named Bangaru Thirumalai. Bangaru Thirumalai was actually the father of this boy she had adopted. And some years after the adoption, he decided that he had a better claim to the throne than Meenakshi did. So he decided he wanted the throne. he quickly allied himself with all these ministers whom Meenakshi had thrown out, and he started a revolt within the kingdom. Meenakshi was shocked. When all this was happening, their neighbor was the kingdom of Arcot. Now, Arcot, the Nawab of Arcot, was actually superior to the Madurai kingdom. So, Madurai was paying taxes to the kingdom of Arcot. Madurai was the vassal state of the kingdom of Arcot. So, that year, the king of the Nawab of Arcot sent two people, his son and his nephew, to meet Meenakshi and to bring the taxes back. Bangaru Thirumalai quickly sensed an opportunity in this. He quickly made sons with the son of the king, and he decided, he bribed him, and he told him that you will have to help me to get the kingdom for myself. Meenakshi heard about this, so she quickly offered a bigger bribe to the nephew, and she allied herself with him. Unfortunately, Meenakshi had chosen wrongly, because the nephew he took a large amount of money from her. His name was Chanda Sahib. He took an enormous amount of money from her. He did defeat Bangaru Thirumalai, but instead of putting Meenakshi on the throne, he sat himself on the throne. And what happened to Meenakshi? We don't really know, but stories say that she was imprisoned in her own palace and she was poisoned to death. So Chanda Sahib, who was this nephew, who is now ruling over Madurai and Tiruchi, he ruled for a few years, and then he got way more ambitious. He decided he wanted to capture Arcot too. So he took an army and he went to Arcot. The Arcot king, fearing the army from Tiruchi, quickly allied himself with the British. The British were happy to help him because they loved putting their fingers into local politics at that time. It was very good for them. So the British lent him an army, and this combined force defeated Chanda Sahib thoroughly and killed him. So the Nawab of Arcot emerged the winner in all this, but he now owed the British, isn't it? He had to pay them back. So what did he have? No money in his treasury, but he had something else. So just like that, he picked up the city of Madurai and handed it over to the British. And that is why from 1801, Madurai was ruled directly by the British. So that is a motley bunch of stories that we have told you, isn't it? We've spoken of kings and common men. We've spoken of, let me show you the rest of the pictures that I do have on my PPT. So this was the siege that happened. This was where Robert Clive also earned a name for himself. And that's it. With that, like I said, we reached the end of this 1 hour long storytelling session. It was such a pleasure to take you around and show you the city that Swarna and I love so much. So when things become normal and everything is all right with India, we invite you to come to Madurai. We will take you around and show you all these places. I'm sure we'll even be able to introduce you to some of the lovely food that we have over here. And we can promise you a wonderful time.
Thank you, Akila. Thank you, Swarnaprada, for this amazing, amazing session on Madurai today. And so many stories, so much part of our history. It was really, really beautiful. In fact, at some point, you can visualize you're walking through those palaces and beautiful temples. So thank you so much. I have few questions, Akila. Like, it is one of the most famous city as far as temples are concerned. So of course, one festival Swarnaprada talked about. What are the important festivals, like if I'm planning a trip, what not to miss there in terms of festivals?
Oh, the Chitrai festival is definitely very big. So if you should come to Madurai, you should come during the Chitrai festival. It will be hot, it will be crowded, it will be noisy, it will be difficult to manipulate over the city, but it will be great fun. Beyond that, festivals, well, Madurai has a reputation for having a festival almost every day, isn't it, Swarna?
Yeah.
There's something happening almost every day. So
It's
if you
an
go,
auspicious day, then there are special ceremonies in the temple. If it's see again during the Ayyappan season, it gets crowded with the Ayyappan devotees, or during the season of Palani yatras and things like that. So many of these keeps happening through the year. But the most prominent of one, of course, is the Chitrai festival. That's the one for which almost the entire city, rather I should say the entire district. Because during that time, we don't get as many tourists from outside. Rather, it's almost like all the families come together. So if you see, all people from the nearby villages would all migrate to Madurai. People will just sleep on any given storefront, all the sidewalks, because it'll be a all night long thing. Then morning they might get a few hours of nap. By 10 o'clock, they'll all be ready for the next ceremony or celebration that's about to happen that day. So it's like the city becomes one family. Like
That's
Akila said,
nice, yes.
have all the crowd and chaos, but it's beautiful to experience the spirit
Truly,
at that
yes.
time.
Somebody had asked which month does it happen? It happens somewhere between April and May.
So the dates themselves vary each year. This year, for example, it's starting on April 15th. The Chariot Festival will be on April 25th, but the final Alagar reaching the river, all that happens after, and all the festivals get over on April 30th. So it's a 15-day affair this year.
And other person had asked, what about the bull festival? That's the bull running festival. That's the Jallikattu, which happens in Madurai district, not Madurai proper. You have to go to a place called Aranganallur. That's where the most famous.
2 or 3 places.
Yeah.
It happens in 2 or 3 places around Madurai. There is Palamedu on one. Palamedu is one place. It happens on one day. Alanganallur on the other day. So there are 3 or 4 places in and around Madurai it happens, and each of these happens on different days. So from say Jan 14th, from Pongal, the 15th is Mata Pongal, 16th, so 17th. So it'll happen on each of these days. Every year it happens as well. This year they tried crowd control, but I'm hoping next year we'll be back in full swing. Ms. Bharti, we can't.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much. And okay, when we come to festival, it is a big festival in northern part of India also. We have Holi, which is on Monday, festival of colors. So we just want to know, is there any Holi in South India also? If it happens, how it is different from the northern India?
Very nice question, Bharti, but I'm so sorry to say that we really don't celebrate Holi in South India at all. See, it is a spring festival, isn't it? And South India does not see a spring because we are closer to the equator than the northern part of the country is. So, like I always like to say, we have 3 seasons in India: hot, hotter, and hottest. So only if there's a cold going into hot do you need a spring festival. We don't have one. But yes, there is a larger North Indian population that is there in South India now, and they celebrate. So slowly, we too are learning about the joys of going out and celebrating Holi. But it is in no way, it can in no way be called a big festival over here.
Okay. One more question which is just come from the viewers is, who built the Meenakshi temple that we see today? So it was built in by whom? Yeah.
That is a very nice question. So like I said before, what was initially there is that central space, which was called a sacred space. And we know that that space was there and that there were gods and goddesses inside that space, because as early as the 7th century, when the Bhakti movement started in South India, poets have spoken about the gods who were there. But the temple structure, at least the beginnings of the temple structure, started coming in there much later, by around the 12th century, when one of the Pandya kings began building over there. 13th century, Sundara Pandyan added much more to it. 14th century, it almost came down, because that was when the troops of Malik Kafur came down south, and Meenakshi temple was a big target. But what you can see now, all those beautiful structures that we've been showing you on our PPT, well, most of them were built in the 1600s under the Nayak rule. So they were the ones who added all the big gopurams, and they were the ones who created the temple as you can see it today.
One more question, it's all about connectivity. A lot of people are asking how to reach Madurai, what are the best ways to reach Madurai, and typically how many days one need if they want to see and experience Madurai in its true sense.
Shall I answer that, Akila?
Please, yes.
So so connectivity, if you take connectivity, Madurai has an international airport. We have flights even to, before COVID at least, we had flights directly to Sri Lanka and Dubai every day from here, and from many other cities in India as well. Or from Chennai, there is, I think, 4 or 5 trains, if I'm not wrong, every night. So it's an overnight journey if you take the train from Chennai to Madurai. Or there's also the Tejas Express now that gets you here within 5 hours, if I'm
5
not
hours.
wrong,
Yes.
4 to 5
Yes.
hours.
5 hours.
So a lot of options to reach Madurai today. Madurai is very well connected that way. In fact, this is the airport most people travel to go to Rameshwaram as well. So it's very well connected that way. And if you think about how long in Madurai, well, I would say give it at least 2 to 3 days, if especially if you want to see all the other interesting sites we've been talking to you about as well. So the city is quite charming. The old city still remains, a large part of the old city still remains. You have the built architecture that Tirmalai Nayak built, and in and around Madurai there is a lot to explore and see as well. So definitely I would recommend. Sorry, Akila.
Yeah, and truly, we have the shopping also, no? Let's not forget that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Madurai is very famous for that too, along with the eating. So cotton is still a very big thing. Like I told you, the Romans took it from here, but even today, Madurai cottons are very fine, very soft. The tie and dye technique of Madurai, it's called Shungudi. And there is one. I mean, it's not just Rajasthan that has one. Madurai has one unexpectedly, and those cottons are beautiful. And then there is the jasmine. You can't miss the jasmine in Madurai. It is incredible. They have a very special fragrance, and one of the biggest exports from Madurai is this jasmine, even today. I mean, the French perfume industry takes a lot of jasmine flowers from Madurai to their country, and they distill the essence to use as fragrance basis in many of their very expensive perfumes. So there's this beautiful market called the flower market in Madurai, which deals with nothing but shop after shop after shop selling nothing but white jasmine flowers and the fragrance. Oh, wow. Oh, here's somebody who's saying Jigardanda is specific. Why? Go, Shubha.
The food, if you start us on food, we could be sitting here for the next couple of days just talking about the food in Madurai. And like we said, people, if you talk to people in Madurai, you could have stuffed yourself for 2 days. Third day, you meet a new person, they'll tell you, oh, you didn't eat in that place, or you didn't try this dish, or then you haven't eaten anything at all. You should definitely try that. So there are thousands of eating places, if I may say so. I live in Madurai.
So much to do. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
I
so
live
much to
here,
do
but
in this
even
wonderful
today I keep
city.
discovering new places here.
Shubha, do you want to say
Thank
something
you
about
so
the
much,
Jigardanda?
Akila. And
Sorry,
what?
Somebody had asked about Jigardanda.
So
Yeah, please.
Ms. Bharti will just quickly talk about Jigar Tanda. See, Jigar Tanda is sort of like a mix between, I can't say exactly like, but it's closest relative. You can compare it to a Faluda. It has milk and cream.
Ice cream.
It's very sweet, a lot of sugar, but they also add the gum of the almond tree called the badam pisin. There is the nanari sharbat that's added to it, and it's a cold drink which we believe came from the Arabs. And of course, as you can see, the name itself, Jigar Tanda, means jigar, and tanda, something that's cooling to the heart. It's not from this region at all, so clearly it has traveled far to get here. But Jigar Tanda again is something that you can't not taste or eat when you are in Madurai. Ms. Bharati, you are on mute.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, thank you so much, Sonpada and Akila. Wonderful to hear about this lovely food trail that you have there in Madurai. And now, Padmavati, hand it over to you. You please, maybe you can conclude now.
Hope all the participants, hope you all enjoy this session on stories of Madurai. I would like to, the thing is detailed description on Madurai, its temples, then palace, then Keeladi, that excavation thing, and then cuisine, and that Madurai Malli, that is jasmine, and Vitta Vasal, that Madurai Kanji, whatever. It was totally, live and interesting session. Hope you all enjoy that thing. Madam, I would like to thank Akila Madam and Swarna Madam and Bharati Madam as well for providing all the participants to know a lot more details about Madurai and its places. Also, I would like to request the Story Trails team to explore much more cities in Tamil Nadu as well. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shaw.
Thank you, Padma. Thank you
Pleasure,
so
ma'am.
much.
Thank you.